Welcome back to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, a bold blend of coffee and movie review podcasting. My name is Nick Delaney, and I'm your show host, coffee and movie aficionado, and the guy who has already lived so many different lives in 2025. In today's episode, bundle up with your nicest fur coat because we are discussing the newest iteration of the classic Wolfman story. Along with this, we will be discussing the winter chai from the Grounds Coffeehouse in Stafford, Virginia. Please take a seat, stay a while, and let's talk werewolves and werewoman with the potential for some were-thems over some coffee. Actually, I think they would all be called werewolves. I think. Before we get into things, I wanted to give just several updates about the show and about just the world we are living in. So here is that. I am so sorry that it's been a little bit of a while. I think it's officially probably been about a month since I released an episode. So sorry about that. That is because I have experienced a record low amount of motivation to do a lot of different things, and that may or may not be connected to world events that are happening right now. So please forgive me for that. I hope you all have been making it through all of this okay as well, and if you have not, I'm here for you. This is a safe space where we can discuss film, and don't be scared to reach out. Along with that being said, I am tapping the brakes, tapping, keyword, on the video element for this show. I had a great time putting together videos for the Uncommon Christmas series and the Penguin episode, but I think that has been keeping me from making this podcast as well. I really like the video element. I think it's really cool that I can have like some visual notes, but it's a lot of work and I really don't know if I have time for it. And if I do have time for it, I'm really like busting my butt all week around, working around my full-time job to get it done. So it's just a bit much, and I don't want that to be the reason that I don't make this show. So it is being put on hold, or it's more of something that will like just be around here or there. So it's not going away completely. I'm not done with the video element, but I will just be using it less. So sorry to those of you that were watching. Thank you for watching. And I can't wait to put it together again when I have a little bit more time in my schedule. With all of that being said, the world is a lot right now, and I just was taking time to focus on other things. I hope you have been taking time to focus on other things as well. I have a lot of updates that I want to give you all, but I'll save that for another day and get right into it. I think the first thing I should note is that Coffee Nick's Movie Picks is no longer on TikTok. That account will not be used, and I will not be going back to TikTok, hopefully. You can still find the show on Instagram at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks for now, and you can find the show at Coffee Nick on Blue Sky, which may be becoming the primary social media for this show. And the biggest thing that I would like to speak about just right at the top of this episode is the loss of David Lynch. I put out a statement on Instagram about this right when it happened because I feel like I just had a lot to say right away. But for anyone who is a creative or who lives in the world of film, this is a devastating loss. David Lynch is just the guiding star for creativity and originality. I think that he is the greatest filmmaker of all time. I think that he is one of the greatest artists of all time. And all of us are so lucky that we were walking on this earth at the same time as him. I was so devastated to hear this news, and I know that a lot of you listening probably were as well. I don't want to talk about this too much right now, just because I don't really have everything like ready to say. And I'm still processing it myself. But I do plan on making an entire episode dedicated to David Lynch in the coming weeks. I want to do a review of the David Lynch documentary, The Art Life. So I'll be talking about David Lynch at length and honoring him more specifically in that episode coming soon. Also, speaking of that, what is up ahead for the show? I am planning a review of The Substance, and I know I said that was coming before, but it officially is as well. I rewatched it, I took a lot of notes, and I have a lot to say about that movie. So that is coming down the road. Also, on February 13th, the show will be celebrating its first birthday, so I'm finding a way to celebrate the show on that day with maybe like a little special episode or something. And then I also am planning a 2024 recap and awards episode. I have a lot of different categories that I plan on giving awards for, and I'm making a little nomination list, and then, of course, choosing a winner for each category. So I'm excited to share that with you all as well. But getting right into everything, let's get into the Now Brewing segment. And this is a luxury coffee discussion and review segment. Now brewing in this episode is the Winter Chai from the Grounds Coffeehouse in Stafford, Virginia. Now, I love to talk about the coffee house first. So this coffee house was so lovely. The inside is very bright. It's like a very white color. There's lots of like white painted wood everywhere. It kind of has like a rustic sort of vibe to it. But it's very clean, it's very bright, and it's a very friendly atmosphere as well. When I went, it wasn't very busy, but I imagine that it does get pretty busy sometimes. And the drink I got is called a winter chai. And I actually did not take note of what was in that. But from what I remember, if I'm remembering correctly, it is a dirty chai with whipped cream and cinnamon. I love dirty chais, but usually if I'm going to get one, it is just by itself. There's no additional flavor or topping or anything because it's just one of those drinks that I think it stands out best on its own. So I was like a little hesitant to get this one. Also, I know I'm going to post the picture on Instagram and it looks like a very like holiday type of drink. But I think that this drink could be enjoyed all year round. I think that the winter chai was the perfect balance of flavors. Oh my God. There is a bag hanging in my closet right now and it scared me. It's my Renaissance bag from the Beyonce tour. So it's like a chrome color and it was like shining in the light. It kind of looked like a mask hanging up above me. That was really scary. What was I talking about? Yes. Okay. It was the perfect balance of flavors. I was a little worried about one of the flavors being too overpowering, but it was great. And I also was a bit worried about the whipped cream on top. As you know, I am a little bit sensitive to dairy, so it was a risk getting the whipped cream either way. But I thought it was a nice touch. I don't remember even suffering the consequences later, so to speak. So it just worked out fine. So I think I did get this with oat milk as well. So the whipped cream was kind of just canceling out the oat milk, I guess. Is that how it works? I don't know. Um, but it was a nice touch, not too overpowering. I thought that this drink was perfect. I got it hot. I don't think it would have been as good cold, and especially right now when it is like single digit temperatures at some times of the day. This is just the perfect drink to warm up with. So I really recommend getting this, and I can't wait to go back to this place and try another one of their drinks. They had such a huge menu, and I got the impression that they made everything with care. Just looking at their website and their Instagram and observing the barista making the drink behind the bar. This place definitely puts a priority on serving the best product, which I really appreciate, whether that be coffee, a pastry, or hot chocolate. This place definitely seems to make their drinks with love. So I really recommend going there and trying it out if you're in the Stafford, Virginia area. So with all of that being said, I'm going to give the winter chai the Nick pick. Okay, Moving right along, this is our coffee thought segment, and this is an outlet dedicated to voice my many incoherent thoughts over a lovely cup of coffee. And of course, I do not have coffee with me today. I hope that you have coffee with you. That would be lovely. I actually don't have a drink right now. Isn't that a travesty? But what I would like to talk about today is social media. I would like to talk about that, more specifically, short form video content. There is a lot to say here. I will say that short form video content is one of the reasons why I made a video podcast. Short form video is king right now. And it really is like the best way to expand an audience or to like reach new people. But I don't necessarily need to start a video podcast in order to make short form video content. There's ways to like make my audio clips into some sort of visual method, I guess. But I think that short form video content, and this is not like a hot take or anything, at least I think that short form video content is kind of destroying us, or at least our attention spans. So often at the movie theater these days, you see people taking out their phones and everything. And I can't help but think that that is a credit to sort of like those videos on TikTok where it's like you're watching one thing and then there's like an episode of Family Guy playing next to it. I think our brains have been conditioned to sort of, I don't know, ping pong back and forth between two different sources of entertainment at the same time. Like a lot of people, if they're watching a TV show, they're also folding laundry or they're also crocheting. And I think that's great, especially crocheting. It's just a way to sort of keep yourself, what's the word? Like have something tactile you're working on. And it might even help you focus on the show. But this is different where we sort of like need one screen to distract us from another screen. And I've seen a lot of things that Netflix has been recommending or ordering some of its shows to have it so that someone who would be folding laundry or not be watching, they would still be able to tell what was happening even if their eyes aren't on the screen. So that means the characters would need to spell out exactly what they're doing on screen. There's no sort of like showing instead of telling. Everything is being told to cater to the audience member that is really not even fully paying attention to the show. And I would just like to say that I think that is bullshit. Yeah, 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 I said it. I do not, why, I don't know if that's true, by the way. I do not know if that's true. Do not quote me on that. I think I just saw like an article or a tweet or something that was saying that that is something that was being passed around at Netflix, that quote unquote recommendation. Why are we catering film, shows, entertainment, media, art to audience members who are not even giving it the time of day? With that sort of mindset, we just will not be getting good shows. Like we can accept that, at least not on Netflix or whatever platform is deciding to do this. We won't get good shows anymore. I think as I heard this from one of my recent favorite podcasters, Stacey Ponder on the Detective and the Log Lady podcast. The Blair Witch Project is not a good movie because we see so much of the witch. I think overexposure or exposing a subject or a character or whatever it may be on a show is the number one way to harm it. I think because TV shows and movies are a form of art, there needs to be some room for interpretation. And I think when whatever it is, studio executives or even writers or whoever takes away the power from audiences to interpret that art, I think the art is being harmed. I think it's being harmed. And don't get it wrong. I do think it's not all about the audience member. It's not all about their experience. It's also about the artist and their experience and communicating that experience through the art. But I don't know. This seems more like a studio problem and not an artist problem. All of this going back to short form content, I think our attention spans are being hurt. Or I think that we are thinking that we can multitask too much. And I think we need to give, or at least like the average person needs to give movies and TV shows the time of day more often. There needs to be more sitting down and focusing on a show. If that's an issue we're facing right now, is like, how do we cater to someone like who's folding laundry or playing Scrabble while watching a show? If that's the issue right now, then I think we need to focus more on like how do we change audience members' priorities. And I think one way to do that is to stop condensing everything into short form content. Hey, there's a conclusion. There's one. You know, maybe I don't want to reduce my podcast into little bite sized pieces. Maybe if you want to get it, you have to watch the whole thing or listen to the whole thing. There we go. Um, yeah, so there's that. I also, just speaking on social media a bit, it's just been bananas. It's frankly been bananas. There's been so much happening, and there's so much back and forth, and there's just a lot to digest on social media. And if you are feeling that way, you are not alone. If you're feeling like you need to take a break from social media, you are not alone. And take that break. If you're feeling like you can't leave social media and you're on it for hours and hours and hours a day, take that break. You may need to take a break. I think in the short, however many hours that TikTok was banned, I did notice how many people may have an addiction to social media. I think like once TikTok got reinstated or whatever you want to call it, the people that were like, yes, oh my God, it's back, and like doing backflips, that is also concerning. Because one, this was a setup and you just got played. And two, it was gone not even a whole day, maybe not even half a day. I don't know. I wasn't counting the hours. And if you had time to count the hours, I recommend reading a book, going on a nice walk, feeling the cold air on your skin, watching a nice long movie, maybe Inland Empire, or The Brutalist, which I did see, that was good, or listening to the Essentials playlist for Bob Dylan on Apple Music. Maybe going to Target and buying a rug for your room that you always wanted to get. Or maybe going outside on a long walk, taking a smoke break. I don't know. Social media has been far too much. It's been a lot. I think we are getting to the point where we need to take a break and we need to refocus on the real physical, tangible things that are in front of us. And we need to focus on creating things. And when I say creating things, I don't necessarily mean like funny little short form videos. Like, I think we need to focus on creating like expansive works. I know that's something that I have a challenge doing. I'm saying all these things knowing fully well that I have the issues too. I'm on Instagram Reels. I'm looking through all the little funny Instagram Reels. I'm trying to back off more too. I'm not saying I'm perfect or a saint with any of these things. This is just me thinking out loud and thinking about what could be or some potential solutions to, I don't know, problems that I think are present or problems that I have identified. Maybe you don't think any of these would work as solutions, or maybe you don't think there are any problems. And that's okay. But these are just all thoughts in my head right now. So this is the coffee thought. This is the coffee thought. So that's what this segment is for. Okay, I think I'm done. I think I'm done. In this next segment, the Now Showing, it's our feature ideological analysis and critical film review segment, hosted by yours truly. In today's Now Showing, we're taking a look at the 2025 iteration of Wolfman. Wolfman, directed by Lee Wanell, is a reiteration of the classic monster. When Blake, played by Christopher Abbott, learns that his estranged father was declared dead, his city-dwelling family goes to the countryside to collect his things, hoping to grow closer in the meantime. After a mysterious car accident, things get hairy. Sort of. Bad movies are so back. Bad movies are so back. For a while, I didn't think they'd come back, but here we are. And this is an annual occurrence, unfortunately. It is referred to in cinema circles as Dumpuary, where sort of like the movies that studios don't expect to do very well are quote unquote dumped into January and February, which are known to be very underperforming months in the cinemas. And I think that this movie would fit right into this category. I do think that. And this just goes to show that we are coming up on one full year of this podcast, because I think that this podcast originated in Dumpuary. Maybe this podcast is Dumpuary. Um, but it started with, as the true fans know, I'm sure, we started with Argyle, which was not a great film. But speaking on this one a bit, I want to switch things up with this film discussion just a little bit, because I think that this film is so hard to talk about on its own, and it sort of needs to be contextualized a bit, at least within the werewolf subgenre of movies. So I'm going to mention a few other werewolf movies in this discussion. But to sort of talk about just this movie on its own for a little bit, there are so many choices made with this movie that I just do not think worked to the movie's favor. The first one being that this all happened in one night. So, like I said in the summary, this family went to the countryside to collect their quote unquote deceased grandfather's belongings from his house. So we never actually like see them like collecting the belongings. Not that that's why I went to the movies to see that happen. But everything goes wrong the second they get to the countryside, basically. And this whole movie takes place over the first night they get there. Right away, I think that that is a bit of a mistake for a werewolf movie to make. Because, the thing about werewolf movies is that we see whatever character is turning into the aforementioned beast. We see that character wake up the next morning in their human form, sort of like piecing together what happened the night before, like a really bad hangover, and dealing with the consequences to their werewolf-y actions. And we don't get that here. We don't really get that character, this character, Blake, Christopher Abbott. We don't get him waking up and realizing everything that happened or having to piece that together himself. And that makes me think of the first movie that I want to talk about, An American Werewolf in London, which I think does a great job. I think there's like 2 days that go by where the main character in American Werewolf in London, he has to deal with the consequences of him becoming a werewolf the night before. The other decision that this film made, which there's going to be quite a few of these decisions, that I did not appreciate, was just the overall transformation. I think was handled really poorly. And much like An American Werewolf in London, Have I been saying Paris? Sometimes I say Paris when I mean London. I get tripped up with that movie. So sorry if I said that before. Um, the transformation sequence in American Werewolf in London, I think, is not only like one of the best werewolf transformations, but just like one of the best like movie moments of all time. And it's so brutal and grotesque, and there's like bones breaking, and you can see his face like stretching in real time. And, I do respect and appreciate that this movie, 2025's The Wolfman, did try to do something different here. They tried to show the werewolf disease, as they sort of called it. They tried to show it as like an illness where the person was like slowly getting more feverish or ill, or like uh, started transforming, but it happened very slowly throughout this night where the movie takes place. So I think there were ways to do this. And I don't think the movie did it the best way, because for a large portion of the night in which this movie took place, Blake sort of just looked like he had a fever. He looked sweaty. He did look really shitty. He did not look good at all. But he didn't look like he was transforming per se. But then there was this one moment when they got inside a car, and this moment is in the trailer. They get inside a car, and Blake sits in the middle seat in the back, and it frames him perfectly so the audience can look at him directly face to face. And his face looks completely different. And you can tell, like, oh, now he's transforming. And I don't like that they did this because to me, it felt like the werewolf transformation, which I feel like is a very important part of any werewolf movie, is sort of reduced to just a double take, where you're just like, oh, wow, like he transformed. And we lose all of like the power of the werewolf transformation, which it's just like such a important part of any werewolf movie, I think. And maybe this they could have made this work somehow, like showing the transformation as like an illness overtaking someone. That could be really horrific. But it just made it kind of like a background element. There were moments in the movie where, we got to see like Blake's nails breaking off, and like his claws would come in under his nails. There were some like really horrifying things here. And I also did like that it was treated like an illness, and there were moments where Blake would lose his sanity, and he would be like gnawing away at his arm where he got the scratch mark. Like that was really disturbing. So I can tell that there were ideas here that were working, and I think that this could have worked if it were treated differently, or if it were approached a little bit differently. So it's a little disappointing that they couldn't make this work, or they had to sacrifice those really powerful werewolf transformation moments in order to show this thing that didn't quite work out too well. This is also something sort of to do with the transformation that I think straight up did not like that much. And I think this is unique to this werewolf movie particularly. But for a majority of like the first part of the movie, when Blake is still operating as like a normal guy, we are actually seeing things from Blake's perspective. And what is really happening is that he is like speaking gibberish to his wife and daughter. So, Blake, as his mental state is starting to deteriorate and he is turning into the werewolf, he is like still trying to protect his family and everything from the other werewolf that is chasing them. And he'll like turn around and say something to his Charlotte and Ginger, the other characters. And he'll be like, hey, like, do you guys have nails so I can nail this door shut? And when we first realized that what we were seeing from Blake's perspective was not reality, they show that. And Ginger and Charlotte are just like standing there looking at him like he had three heads, and you're kind of like, okay, why are they doing that? And then later we learn that what Charlotte and Ginger are seeing is actually him speaking gibberish. So there's one moment where he like says something in his little werewolf land, and what they hear is like, and it sort of was giving like Simlish a little bit. And I don't know why they did this. Why did they do this? Like, it wasn't horrifying. I mean, it wasn't really necessary to the plot. If they wanted him to not be able to communicate, they could have just had it so like he couldn't talk, because of like the fever, or he was just like really delirious. I don't know why like they had to show it as like he was speaking a different language. It was really weird. And he also had like werewolf vision where I don't know, you would see things in like this weird like blue and green filter. And I just don't know if that's like the vibe. This is my professional review. Quote unquote, I don't know if that's the vibe. So, moving on, I wanted to also mention just the design for this version of the werewolf. Another professional opinion, I didn't like it. And this is not a hot take. I know this. I just think this was a bad design for the Wolfman. I think, yes, I actually encourage creative liberties to be taken with designs for classic monsters, for whatever. However, I think that there are some defining characteristics that need to be present in order for like a monster to be identifiable or to even just be considered that monster. This version of the Wolfman was like balding, not very hairy, which is why I made that little joke in the little summary where I was like, things get hairy or not. Hope you appreciated that if you picked up on it. Um, Not very hairy, although they grow hair on like their back, but I have a hairy back, and that doesn't make me a wolf man. Anyways, the face is just like the face for these wolfmen looked like very fleshy. Like it wasn't sculpted well. And I'm not saying like the wolfmen need to have like a chiseled jawline or like really nice cheekbones, but like it just looked like there was like a lot of scarring in their face, or like it was like they had burns or something all over their face. It was just mounds of flesh. And there wasn't really like a snout like on a wolf. So again, like what here is giving wolf? There was one moment maybe when I think we saw Blake howling, but I they showed like his back was turned to the camera, so we couldn't really just like little things like this bothered me where we couldn't like actually see his face looking up at the moon and howling. I think I'm being like really nitpicky with this movie, but also maybe not. Maybe these are just like things that you should be able to expect when you're going to see like a Wolfman movie. And that's the thing. Bringing this back into sort of like a more context heavy discussion, look at An American Werewolf in London. I think that that was released in 1981. And that movie was extremely creative, such a creative spin on like their werewolf subgenre. Just the fact, it did take, there was a part in the countryside, but then it moved the story into the city, which in fact made it even scarier. The fact that like he was not isolated, he was around all these people and all this commotion. It made it even scarier, like a werewolf prowling through a subway station. Like it was horrifying. And those were creative liberties taken. So I think that just serves as an example of like a werewolf movie where they were able to very finely balance traditional tropes of that subgenre with creative liberties. And I think that this movie, I think it tried to do that in some places, but it just failed. It failed in the places where it was trying to take risks, which is really unfortunate. I do think that this movie tried to modernize the Wolfman story and make it relevant to the year 2025 in some ways. I think that they did this through their use of subtext and narrative. We find out towards the end of the film, spoiler alert for those who would like to see this and not have it spoiled. We find out that the original werewolf that is chasing the family, that causes them to run into the house hiding all night, protecting themselves, is Blake's father. And we know that Blake struggled a lot as a child and became estranged from his father because his father was very emotionally abusive in some ways and was very hard on Blake and did not let Blake show his emotions or express any sort of emotions. And when we see Blake as a father to Ginger, we see that these issues from his childhood and from his own father have carried over to his parenting style and just him as a person. He has trouble communicating his emotions. He has trouble dealing with his daughter's emotions, and he also has trouble managing his temper and his anger. And at the very end of this movie, we literally see Blake's father and Blake both as wolfmen sort of battling each other, almost like Blake is literally trying to battle away these generational issues that his father passed down to him through his sort of abusive parenting. I think that this is a pretty good use of the Wolfman premise to depict these toxic masculinities being passed down almost like an illness, because Blake's father is the one that passes on the werewolf disease to Blake. So the Wolfman disease is like a representation of this toxic masculinity that gets passed from generations of men to generations of men. I think that this was pretty well done, and I appreciate that the film did this. However, I think that it could have gone a lot deeper with this idea. I was kind of waiting the entire film for it to get there. Really, I think that this film, everything on the back end needed to be moved all the way to the front end. It just felt like we got the werewolves like way too late, and there was too much like of the sort of illness, very slow transformation happening at the beginning. I think if we moved up what happened at the end towards the front and we showed a lot more, I don't know, of the conflict and action and horror, I think that the subtext would have been even richer. And I think that if we're looking at werewolf movies released in the past year, within the past year, with a really rich subtext, I think that a great example is Night Bitch, starring Amy Adams. I don't know if you could consider this a werewolf movie. I do. I don't think by any means that this is a fantastic movie, but I think that it utilizes werewolf subgenre tropes storytelling in a really cool way, and I really like how this movie used the werewolf concept to its advantage to describe motherhood, and the struggles of being a mother and the challenges, and I don't know, just showing these challenges very head on. So in within the same year of that film being released, I think that this film really just scratches the surface with subtext. My final point is I don't think that this movie was really that scary. And maybe it was because I was so disappointed by this movie that I really stopped caring or being invested in the story and the atmosphere. Or maybe it was the large group of people sitting next to me that were talking throughout the entire movie that sort of made me lose the atmosphere. But I don't know. There really wasn't anything super threatening in this film, and there wasn't really that mystery here that lends itself to horror. I do think that the opening to this movie was quite scary. I remember I was covering my eyes at one point in the opening, but very quickly after that, did it just kind of lose me. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. I think it took too long to get to anything really scary happening within the central storyline. I think that the transformation, because it happened so slowly, there wasn't really any horror in it. I don't know. It was such a slow burn that it just sort of fizzled out for me. And I don't know. Yeah. So, with all of that being said, I am unfortunately going to give Wolfman, the 2025 version, the Nicks. 44 years after the release of An American Werewolf in London, this iteration of Wolfman barely even scratches the surface of creativity. Released within the same year as Night Bitch, which is by no means a spectacular movie either, it also really isn't contributing any new ideas. 2025's Wolfman is a derivative, unmemorable, and lacking film that feels like it was made for no other reason than we haven't had one in a while. The performances are solid, and I appreciate the creative attempts that were made, but much like this version of the werewolf, this film doesn't have much hair on its chest. Did you guys like that? Good one, huh? Go see it if you want like a fun little Friday night thriller movie. But I don't know. If you haven't seen An American Werewolf in London, go watch that instead. Go see that. I think that's much more worth it. Even Night Bitch. I don't think Night Bitch is spectacular. I would give it the Nick Mix, I think, but it still has such interesting and creative and new ideas. So watch it for that reason. But yeah, getting into the last and final segment of this episode, Dear Coffee Nick. In this segment, I'll be reading some letters from fellow coffee and movie enjoyers about their own coffee and movie opinions, reviews, thoughts, hot takes, or whatever. The first one says, Dear Coffee Nick, what would you pick as your last movie before you die? From Cooper. Oh my gosh, Cooper, what? Not this dark question. Do you foresee me dying anytime soon? Goodness. But this is a good question. I think I would probably pick Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And I was going to say Lady Bird, but I changed my mind. And I would pick Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me just because of the ending. I won't spoil much about it. There's no Twin Peaks spoilers here. But the ending is very comforting in a very strange way. So I don't know. It just feels like the perfect movie to end with. Yeah. All right. And then, Cooper, your second question says, Dear Coffee Nick, what was the first movie that made you feel seen/represented? From Cooper. This is a really good question as well. And the answer is very easy. I'll have to say Lady Bird. I mentioned this when I reviewed Lady Bird and probably several times during my Greta Gerwig series, but I watched Lady Bird when I was entering my senior year at Catholic high school. And that year was a very difficult year for me. So when I watched this movie for the first time, I really connected with it, just because of the relationship that is shown between Lady Bird and her mother, the friendship between Lady Bird and Julie, and how they rift apart and then end up coming back together. Lucas Hedges, his name in the movie is Danny. Danny's entire storyline is just very relatable, and I connected to it a lot. There are so many elements to that movie that made me feel so represented, and even just like the anti-abortion rally happening in the school gymnasium, it felt so real to what I was living through, and I felt like just that overall angst to everything that Lady Bird had. But also, she was a character with very intense and deep emotions and desires. So I related to that as well. Yeah, so that definitely is the answer to that question. Thank you so much for sending in those questions. You always have such fun questions. And I hope you're doing well, Cooper. If you would like to send in a letter, please feel free to write Dear Coffee Nick through DM on social media or email coffeenicksmoviepics@gmail.com. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, and thank you for your patience as I got a new episode together. I am still struggling with motivation a bit, just with everything going on, but it feels good to finally be recording episodes again, and I hope that this sort of jumpstarts me and kind of gets me rolling again with episodes. All right. Before you go, please be sure to follow at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and at Coffee Nick on Blue Sky. There you can stay up to date on everything about the show. If you liked what you heard, please rate the show on your podcast app of choice and share the show with your friends. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, I'll be howling at the moon. Thanks again for listening to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Our opening theme is The Moondrops, and our closing theme is March of the Hares, both songs by Nathan Moore. Before you go, please be sure to follow the show on social media at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and TikTok, and give the show the Nick Pick by rating it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thanks again, and see you next time.